Hello, I am Joshua P. Warren, and I'd like to demonstrate some things for you that may give you some insights on the so-called magic of shapes. You know, researcher Robert Pavlida claimed that one of the keys to his psychotronic generators was discovering how to combine certain shapes in a way that would focus some kind of unusual or psychic power. And you know, this also touches on the subject of sacred geometry, how that certain shapes might influence or channel things from the environment. So let's take a closer look at how all this may work. Now, first off, I, as a guy who studies electrostatics, have certainly been aware for a long time that shapes can definitely affect the way that electrostatic charge behaves. For example, a lot of generators like a Van de Graaff generator have a dome or a sphere on top, and that's because this shape naturally builds up electrostatic charges. And when it builds them up, it increases them to a critical point when you get a discharge, just like a lightning bolt. And then, of course, it has to recharge again for a while and then discharge. And so this takes a small amount of electrostatic charge and stores it up like a capacitor, and then create something powerful. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. One of Pavlida's little wands that he used to pull out and demonstrate supposedly looked something like this. A little metal tube with a kind of metal sphere on top, which happens to look a lot like some of the wands that we actually use when we are doing electrostatic demonstrations to draw off discharges. Interesting. But if you want to do the opposite of that, if you don't want to build up a charge, well, instead of using something that's round or spherical or dome-shaped, well, you want something that is pointy, like this needle. And if you take something like a needle and you put it on top of an electrostatic generator, it will not allow it to build up a substantial charge because the charge just flows. It sprays off the tip of the needle. Now, Benjamin Franklin understood this, and so that's why that Benjamin Franklin invented his famous lightning rod, which was basically a big needle that you would put on top of a building so that it would help prevent the buildup of electrostatic charge that would cause a lightning bolt to strike and burn the building down. It's even better if you run a wire from the lightning rod down to the ground so that any charge that does hit would just go into the ground and bypass the building. So when you have a pointy shape like this, it doesn't even allow a big charge to build up. And the only difference between a pointy piece of metal and a round piece of metal is, well, it's the shape. And yet the shape makes a huge impact on how that the electrostatic charge behaves in the environment. That's just a really easy example. But let's break this down and look at some things that are a little more basic. Some shapes that are a little more hard to, I guess, envision interacting in a strange way with the environment. Let's start with this. You've probably seen one of these before. It's called a Rattleback. And all this is a piece of plastic, but it has an interesting shape. And in fact, this shape has fascinated people for thousands of years because even ancient people would find rocks in creeks and rivers that were sort of naturally shaped like this, and eventually discovered that this is, again, just a piece of plastic, and yet it prefers to spin a certain way. So for example, if I spin it clockwise from my point of view, it just keeps going and going and going and going. It likes that direction. But if I simply take it and spin it the other way, it doesn't like that direction, and so now it stops and goes into its preferred direction. Now, you know, we think if something is always carrying through with the direction of momentum it's given. And so it's very unusual for us to take something that's, you know, there are no moving parts here. It's just a shape. And yet again, you spin it one way, it says, nope, it wants to go the other way. So that's one that a lot of physicists sort of scratch their heads over. And, scientists, they can give a description for, how they think this sort of process works, talking about gravity and equilibrium, but even gravity is still a very mysterious thing. But even though you may have seen one of these rattlebacks, I'd be surprised if you've seen one of these. This is called a Gombok. You can see I actually bought this from a mathematics museum in New York. And this is a relatively new invention. This is a shape that was first theorized by a Russian mathematician in 1995. And it took 11 years for a couple of researchers, a couple of scientists in Hungary to finally create this shape and turn it into reality. Now here's what's so unusual about the Gombok, okay? It's one of these shapes that, again, it's just a hunk of plastic, that's all it is, no moving parts, and yet it definitely prefers to be in certain positions as opposed to others. So I'll give you a very basic example of this. We take this Gombok, we sit it down, it's just a piece of plastic, and so now I'm going to remove my hand and watch what the Gombok does. Well, it didn't like that direction. It's decided to change course. And these Gomboks do all kinds of funny things. Let's take another look at what happens. Again, it's a piece of plastic. You'd think it should just sit still. But not only does it move, it says, nope, I don't like this position. Now I want to go that way. This is another example of how just the mere shape of something is able to determine its relationship to the physical world, the physical reality. It's a very odd little move. So it's a lot like the Rattleback in that sense. But here is the most sensational example, perhaps, of the importance of shape. This is a little top, but this one is called a Tippy top. Now everybody has played with a top as a kid, right? It's just one piece of metal. This is not like a gyroscope or anything. There are no moving parts. Again, it's just a shape. When you sit it down, look at that. It looks very comfortable. It looks very stable. It looks like that's the position in which it belongs. However, if we add little energy to it by spinning it, something pretty extraordinary happens. Watch this. See that? It literally reverses. It goes upside down, and then now it's comfortable moving with the large section on the top and the little stem on the bottom. Isn't that weird? Let's watch that again. Now, it's very difficult for us to wrap our minds around why that this shape prefers to orient itself like that when we start to spin it, when it's so comfortable otherwise just sitting still. And so, yeah, this definitely has made a lot of physicists scratch their heads. So, as you can see, these are just some very basic examples of how that the mere shape of something sort of can inherently determine the way it interacts with physical reality. And so it may be that Robert Pavlita was onto something. So I think that we all need to experiment more with taking various shapes, various materials, combining them together, and maybe we'll find some kind of a magic combination of shapes that's able to tap into another force or energy, magnify it, do something amazing with it. And if you know of other examples of shapes that do pretty remarkable things, well, I'd love for you to let me know by posting it in the comments below. I hope you'll also like this video and subscribe, And if you want to stay updated on my experiments as I continue to explore psychotronics and the magic of shapes and sacred geometry and all that, please go to my website, joshuapwarren.com, joshuapwarren.com. Thank you for watching.